28 years later, The Bone Temple releases this week, and it looks to add to what is already a pretty stacked genre. So without further ado, we are counting down my personal top 20 zombie movies in history. I am sorry in advance, this is probably going to be a long one. Also, an important note, films with more demon-adjacent zombies do not count for this list. So the Deadites from Evil Dead, the creature things from the Demons movies, and even the zombified freaks from modern classics like When Evil Lurks, all sadly do not qualify. Still amazing entries though. And now a few quick honorable mentions to get us started. 2013's World War Z, a film where the rate of acceleration of the zombie apocalypse is put on full display. Fast zombies, clicking zombies, and Brad Pitt as a UN rep who gets to see firsthand how overconfident and unprepared every single nation is when it comes to combating the undead. Next, 1981's Burial Ground. Low-budget, yucktastic effects where undead rural Etruscan zombies are only the second grossest thing when compared to Italian sleaze and the uncomfortable relationship between a mother and her young child who happens to be played by a 25-year-old man. Next up, 1977's Shockwaves, which features an idyllic tropical island, mischievous Peter Cushing, and a troupe of undead aquatic Nazi soldiers. If you ain't a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan, stay out of the water. Next, 2010's The Crazies. The George Romero original may not have featured any zombies, but that doesn't mean the remake can't. Bleak and hopeless and gleefully pessimistic. I love me a good pitchfork. And last, 1980's Nightmare City from the great Umberto Lenzi. Not all zombies have to be covered in rotting flesh. Sometimes they can just have a pile of mold on their face while loving naked boobies. Two sides of the same coin. So, finally, we get to our list. Coming in at number 20, we've got the 1978 French film The Grapes of Death from the great director Jean Rollin. That's the best I got after like 10 tries, guys. Zombies have been interpreted across time by many cultures, but I think it's only apt that in France, they just so happen to be the result of tainted wine. It's slow and surreal and filled with artistic allegories out the ass, but at the end of the day, the name of the game is inescapable dread. And that's really how every zombie movie should play out. Definitely one of the more accessible films from this dude for average normie audiences, like me. Next at number 19, we have Brian Yuzna's drastically underrated Return of the Living Dead 3. From 1993. The super metal-infused badass chick on the poster might not show up till the third act, but it's the exquisite allegory for guilt and grief that takes center stage in this tragic zombie-infused love story, as a young man desperately tries to undo the mistakes that led to his girlfriend's accidental death. It's sad and campy at the same time, with some excellent practical effects set pieces thrown in, despite being wildly different in tone from its Part 1 namesake, which, you never know, might appear later on this list. Next up at 18, we have the wacky-ass genre blend that is the 1974 British cult classic Let Sleeping Corpses Lie, also known as The Living Dead at Manchester Morgue. When a rural-dwelling photographer is found murdered, the police think that the culprits are his abused, heroin-addicted wife, the wife's sister, and a random guy whose motorcycle she happened to ding with her car. Are they correct? No! The culprit is actually the bloodthirsty undead corpse of a bum who drowned in the local river and who's accidentally been reanimated by the Ministry of Agriculture's experimental bug-killing ultrasonic radiation gun. Classic mix-up. Zombies bleeding from their eyes and dozens of shots of the gorgeous English countryside. This one is a boatload of fun. Oh, and also, homicidal babies! Next at number 17, we have one of the first zombie films in history. Jacques Tourneur's I Walked with a Zombie from 1943. The Caribbean voodoo jam that heavily influenced the modern conception of zombies. This is a haunting piece of pure art that doesn't feature as much bloodthirsty gore as it does abstract commentary on colonialist exploitation, with a good bit of undead eerie madness to boot. It's got the same unnerving expressionist dread that came to define a lot of Tourneur's other work, such as Cat People, and it ends up very much feeling like you may have stumbled into someone else's waking nightmare, a staple of the genre for a reason. Next up at number 16, the terrific cult classic Reanimator from 1985. Stuart Gordon and Brian Yuzna teamed up for several low-budget gore jams in the late 80s and early 90s, but the H.P. Lovecraft adaptation Reanimator might be their most well-known by today's standards. A psychotic scientist played by Jeffrey Combs becomes a pioneer in the art of reanimating fresh corpses to hilarious effects, which eventually leads to complete chaos to the tune of a morgue being overrun by frantic, dumbass zombies going absolutely ham on anyone unfortunate enough to run into them. Its glowing green reanimation serum is especially iconic, and its sequels are all equally solid, but the original is really a top-tier zombie horror comedy flick. Tons of fun. Next, coming in at number 15, we have the extremely weird 1994 Italian film Cemetery Man, also known by the much better title Della Morte dell'Amore. Director Michele Soavi is known for a handful of other gialli films as well, but this strangely surreal and weirdly horny zombie comedy is probably his best. Mixing weirdo Italianisms with foggy dreamland vibes, where the undead are as metaphorical as they are literal, and the caretaker of a permanently midnight graveyard has to deal with his own dark and hazy internal philosophical battles, personified by zombies constantly rising from the dead. The ending is a total banger, even if it doesn't make sense 100% of the time, but this is a metric ton of sexually charged fun. Next, moving into more straight-laced zombie mayhem at number 14, we have Zack Snyder's 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead. One of the earliest films I can remember being totally terrified by. The opening alone is one for the record books, as the zombie apocalypse completely destroys the world overnight and forces a ragtag group of survivors to post up inside an abandoned shopping mall. Quite different from the original, this version sees zombies sprinting headlong towards the doomed group of people from all walks of life, and includes tightly wound set pieces that'll keep you permanently clawing at your armrests as the very mean-spirited world in which the film is set quickly falls to pieces. A very easy movie to point to when imagining the inescapability of the modern zombie horde. Next up, moving on to number 13, we have 2009's Zombieland, one of the best horror comedies of my youth. The cast is beyond iconic, with Jesse Eisenberg, Woody Harrelson, Emma Stone, and Abigail Breslin providing our core four of survivors traversing the country midway through a catastrophic zombie apocalypse. But it's the lone cameo from the great Bill Murray that has always stolen the show for me and many other people. Much more relatable than the typical zombie fare, with Harrelson's steadfast desire for Twinkies proving a lasting character trait, and featuring one of my favorite staples of the genre in Eisenberg's thorough list of rules to live by for surviving a world of the undead. The zombie kill of the week portions will always be the best shit to come out of this franchise. And I say franchise loosely because the sequel certainly exists, despite being not all that great. Next at number 12, 1986's B-movie classic, Night of the Creeps. An awesome genre mashup of sci-fi, zombie horror, and pseudo-slasher. The film sees an alien parasite infecting a bunch of frat bros and transforming them into zombies on the night of a raucous party. With endless iconic quotes to spare, Creeps has about as many perfect 50s schlock homages as it does 80s teen comedy tropes, bangin' soundtrack needle drops, and top-tier practical effects. Tom Atkins in particular is legendary as a gruff, determined detective. And as much as I'd like to point to the fantastic flamethrower scene as the highlight of the film, I think I need to just reiterate how elite this script really is. Detective, thrill me. Next, just on the cusp of the top 10, we have George Romero's final entry in his original zombie trilogy, 1985's Day of the Dead. I really had to fight myself to make this list not entirely dominated by Romero, and though the films at the top may counteract that, this entry still comes in at a very admirable spot. Day of the Dead places the audience several years into the outbreak of the zombie apocalypse, following a group of survivors living in an underground bunker and trying to determine how best to traverse life in an undead world. It's much more human than many of the previous entries on this list, with the tragedy of real life and real conflict on full display, as societal collapse apparently presents more issues between the living than it does the dead. However, the zombies in question are still very much a threat, as the final downfall of this slice-of-life utopia shows, and the budget for fake blood becomes quite apparent via the use of standard zombie-killing weapons, such as a run-of-the-mill lawnmower. Romero was truly the king of this type of shit. Now moving into the top 10, we have a pretty unorthodox pick in the 1998 animated film Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. I remember being a massive fan of the OG Scooby-Doo cartoons growing up. And when my parents obliviously allowed me to watch this version, it absolutely fucked me all the way up. Combining elements of old school Scooby-Doo with real life schlock from people like Lucio Fulci and classic horror cinema like Cat People, Zombie Island sees the Mystery Gang thrust headlong into the deep south and the trauma that it holds, where vengeful zombie pirates seek to right the past wrongs done to them, and the iconic crew of Shaggy, Scooby, Fred, Daphne, and Velma have to then dodge actual murderous spirits at every turn. I will die on the hill of this being the best animated horror film of all time, namely for the fact that it took my beloved Scooby-Doo formula and turned it on its goddamn head. The final twist and climactic scene in particular are something that is gonna stay with young Matt till the day I die. Next up at number 9, we have probably the most recent film on this list, 2016's Korean zombie smash, Train to Busan, a movie with an unbelievably breakneck pace. The story follows a group of doomed passengers trapped on an express train from Seoul to Busan as the zombie apocalypse quickly unfolds around them, filled with tense fight scenes and nail-biting sequences where human innovation and barbaric mayhem clash head-to-head. Train to Busan chooses first and foremost to display some of the most efficient human drama ever put to screen in a horror movie. The zombies are fast, but the downfall of societal decency is faster, and the escalation of blood and guts is just about as fun as any modern zombie flick has ever been. I will always love a movie that balances gore and drama as well as this one does. Next, moving to number 8, we have the film that inspired the imminent release which spawned this list, 2002's 28 Days Later. The pairing of Danny Boyle and young Alex Garland is really something that I wish had happened like 12 different times over, but this early 2000s bleak-ass entry has a pretty lasting impact regardless. Following a man who awakens in an abandoned hospital weeks into a devastating zombie apocalypse characterized by the Rage virus, Cillian Murphy traverses an iconically empty London landscape until he reaches a small group of survivors struggling to protect themselves from the relentless horde of the undead infected. It's a testament once again to the horrors that humans inflict on one another rather than the terror unleashed by the frantic undead, with the point being that nature is as much a dog-eat-dog world as it is a man-eat-man world. The sequels to follow would be solid in their own right, with a special shout-out owed to both 28 Weeks and 28 Years, but it's the original that truly came to define the modern genre. A terrific movie. Next, moving to number 7 on this list, we have the ultra campy cult classic, 1985's Return of the Living Dead. The film that spawned the eternally zombie-associated quote, "Brains." This one follows a group of preposterously angsty punk teens and a local warehouse owner as they encounter a chemically kick-started horde of unkillable zombies rising from the local graveyard and devouring the innards of anyone they come into contact with. It's got easily some of the best gore effects of the era, with goopy undead corpses speaking actual English and being solely driven by one thing: their insatiable hunger for human craniums. It's absurdly funny and spawned a very strange franchise of fleshy mayhem, but the original is legitimately one of the best horror comedy films of all time, and a perfect example of what makes the zombie genre just so fun and inventive. Next up at number 6, we venture more into the pure terror of zombie flicks with the phenomenal found-footage Spanish classic 2007's Wreck. I generally despise the found footage genre, with cheap jump scares and manufactured tension propelled by insufferable shaky cam and ridiculous character decisions. But this low-budget entry following a young reporter shadowing a group of firefighters on an unfortunate night may very well be the best one in existence. The sudden moments of pure horror are played to perfection, with one specific splat in particular having historically sent my poor wife fleeing upstairs in terror after she innocently joined my movie night completely unaware of what was to come. It's got twists and turns that steeply escalate the stakes to the highest degree of dread, and the final act in particular is one for the nightmare record books. The American remake Quarantine was relatively decent as well, but the original is truly something to behold. Poor Pablo. Poor Pablo. Now moving into the extremely competitive top 5, we have the last 21st century film on this list and perhaps the best of Edgar Wright's storied career, 2004's Shaun of the Dead. It's getting to the point now where there isn't really much more I can say on these last few films that isn't already widely known. The first entry in the Cornetto trilogy, and arguably the best horror comedy of all time, if it weren't for yet another entry on this list. Shaun of the Dead sees an English dead-end drone plopped straight into the middle of the zombie apocalypse, as he realizes very quickly that his sole priority is joining up with his best friend, his girlfriend, and his all-too-innocent mum by shacking up at his local pub and waiting out the zombie apocalypse over a few pints. One of the best casts and soundtracks of all time, mixed with story beats that'll live on eternally, and just pure fun to be had at every turn. Simon Pegg and Nick Frost are the pinnacle of horror movie bros in this flick. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was near the top of the list for my most rewatched films in both high school and college. A glorious entry. Next, we transition back into the incredible world of Italian horror with what I consider the greatest Lucio Fulci film of all time, 1979's Zombie 2, also known as just Zombie.
And also known as Zombie Flesh Eaters.
Released initially as a spiritual follow-up to Romero's Dawn of the Dead, which had been successfully re-edited and released in Italy by the great Dario Argento, Fulci sought to capitalize on the newfound success of the zombie genre by unleashing a bleakly apocalyptic, dread-filled undead monster mash, taking place on an idyllic tropical island in the Caribbean. The result is perhaps one of the most methodically paced, gore-filled dreadfests that I've ever seen, and emanates vibes that, in my mind, have never been matched. A permanent sunshine state of unbearable doom and inescapable death, where sand-covered corpses rise to entrap the living in a terrifying enclosure of horror and mayhem. A grotesque Armageddon of flesh-ripping chaos. The two scenes that have always stuck with me are the skin-crawling eye gouge sequence and, of course, the infamously immaculate showdown between a zombie and a shark that I'm not sure will ever be topped. It is perfectly repulsive in every sense of the word, and yet somehow beautiful at the same time. A once-in-a-lifetime movie as far as I'm concerned. Oh, and shout out to my shirt. Haha. Next, the greatest horror comedy of all time rounds out our top three as we turn our sights towards young Peter Jackson's magnificent Dead Alive, or Brain Dead, depending on your location, from 1992. Every single second hits. Whether it's the absurdly great gore, the ludicrously hilarious characters, or the undeniably fun story beats, you have kung fu ass-kicking priests, wacky stop-motion rat monkey creatures, zombies doing insane shit like having sex and then giving birth, Nazi doctors with industrial-grade tranquilizers, comedy gags that include severed head pinball, and people running in place due to the gargantuan amount of blood on the floor, and a massive Rancor-esque mother creature with a fat ass and big old titties. There is nothing about this movie that is not grade A insane, and it is flat out the best time you will ever have with a horror comedy. The fact that Peter Jackson veered away from doing this sort of shit into doing actual cinema will always somehow be a tragedy. And that's kind of wild to think about in its own right. Brain Dead, Dead Alive, whatever you want to call it, is absolutely incredible. No notes. Finally, we move into our top two. I've gone back and forth on these a million times over, and honestly, I've had Night of the Living Dead as my #1 zombie movie for the vast majority of my film watching life. But for some reason, I binged both of them yet again this last October and ended up flip-flopping for what I'm sure won't be the last time. So at number 2, we have George Romero's seminal 1968 classic, Night of the Living Dead. I have nothing unique to say about this film. It's one of the greatest pieces of art ever created and has continued to define the genre for the last 50 plus years. Brutally uncompromising in all aspects, with the legendarily low-budget nature of it all, somehow summing up the self-devouring tendencies of the United States post-Vietnam, and replicating the eerie, unflinching, fog-laced essence of humanity in a world where decency and trust were at an all-time low. The siege nature of the film is incredible, and may now be the ultimate depiction of what the terror feels like for really most American families, where no one can be believed or relied upon, and everyone around you only wants the worst for you and your loved ones. An incredibly ferocious piece of motivated filmmaking, and one of my favorite films of all time, regardless of genre. And without further ado, we have the #1 film on this list, 1978's Dawn of the Dead, also directed by Romero and serving as the long-standing sequel to Night of the Living Dead. From the very opening scene, the horrifying crumble of man-made society is truly something to behold, with every aspect of abject humanity and metaphysical good decaying before our very eyes. The safe confines of standard American capitalism seem warming at first, but over the course of just about 2 hours, every single thing you know and love is dissected and torn to shreds by the inhuman horde that represents the downfall of good-natured society, nurtured only by our own inherent neglect and disdain for interpersonal decency. Refuge is nowhere and terror is everywhere. The slow-moving zombies have also grown on me as time has progressed, as the molasses-like doom that awaits our very beings has become only more apparent in my old age. Yes, I know I say that with quotes, but it becomes real far earlier than we want to believe. The true dawn of the dead has been oncoming for decades, and many would choose to believe that we reached that point even before the cynical decade of the 70s in which this is based. Sadly, I don't disagree. This is a prophetic film, and one that more than sums up the actual tragedy of what the zombie genre subtly depicts. Is that my secret way of ending this list on a very pretentious note? Maybe, but also, this movie fucking rocks! So get bent if you disagree. Still love y'all though. Keep that hope alive. Anyway, there's my extremely long-winded list of the top 20 zombie movies of all time. At least how I see it. I really hope Alex Garland and Nia DaCosta have cooked up something special for us with this new 28 years sequel, so make your best effort to catch it while it's still in theaters. If I happen to miss a zombie flick that you love with all your heart, please feel free to mention it in the comments. As always, I'm Matt. Thanks for watching, and this has been the Inferion Channel. Brains!